So, what's this? Episode 205.
205.
Wow.
It's the Peugeot of making tracks. If you didn't get a Fiesta or couldn't afford a Clio, that's what you went for, wasn't it?
I just had a white shed on wheels.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
Boom! This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
So, Mr. Newbold, anything new in your collection this week?
I'm looking and there's not a lot. There's not a lot turned up. I have acquired a ILM Singapore t-shirt.
Nice.
Which is rather groovy.
Yeah.
I need to stop eating so many Mars bars and such because it's a little bit snug.
Is that an XL?
2XL, but I think it's like a Chinese 2XL because it.
So that's the equivalent of a large then.
Not my kind of 2XL. Exactly that. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. So it's a very nice t-shirt, but at the moment it's little more than a bib. It's in the collection already, and it's the 25th anniversary of Beyblade. So Hasbro have very generously sent me some Beyblades. I can see you on the camera looking at me as if to say, what the hell's a Beyblade? I'm going to Google it myself because I don't know what a Beyblade is either. They've sent 4, a couple of Star Wars ones, a couple of Marvel ones. So we're going to open one of the Marvel ones and have a little go and see what the Beyblade thing is all about. So hopefully that will be appearing on Fantha Tracks socials as I take my eye out with a Beyblade. Beyblade just sounds like something that happens on Babe Station, doesn't it?
That's exactly what I thought. I didn't want to say anything, you know.
Well, no. So that's happened. I was at FanX in Farnborough this weekend. Really nice convention. But I didn't actually buy anything, and that's mega rare for me not to buy anything. Got Echo Live coming up this coming Saturday as we speak at Redditch, and I'm selling stuff there. First time I've ever sold anything, apart from my soul. So that'll be an interesting exercise in futility, probably, because I'm trying to sell Black Series and people can't give them away, let alone sell them. So we'll see how that goes.
I'll tell you what, that is the problem at the moment, isn't it? The market, as they say, is very interesting.
So what have you got? I mean, I'm boring you with my lack of stuff. What have you got?
To be honest, not much, really. A couple of High Republic books arrived this week, hardcovers. Nice. So one, A Test of Courage. I've got a sneaking suspicion I've already got that one, but I may not have. I mean, I know I've read or listened to it, I should say.
Justina Ireland?
That's a Justina Ireland. Actually, I think I don't have it. And the reason why I say that is because I was like, I'm only going to buy the adult hardcovers. But then I was like, bugger it. I'll just get the...
get the Disney ones.
Get the Disney ones as well.
Yeah.
So that's turned up. And also George Mann's Tears of Nameless. That's turned up. They say never judge a book by its cover, but the cover looks gorgeous. So yeah. I'm looking forward to cracking that one open or pressing play on the audio.
Charles Soule was raving about that book.
Was he?
Charles Soule was was saying really good things about that. I mean, of course, he's not going to say bad things, is he? But he went out of his way to say how much he enjoyed it. So definitely look forward to that one.
And because it's getting to that time of year, so I picked up a couple of like Hallmark Star Wars Christmas ornaments for the Star Wars Christmas tree. So got a little baby Yoda, Grogu, however you want to say his name, and like a stormtrooper. So those will be dangling from something or other at some point around the festive period in the kitchen, because that's the only place I get to erect my Star Wars Christmas tree is in the kitchen.
We've been getting to the news, haven't we? Because we've got a packed show.
Let's do it.
Sad news, Robert Watts has passed away. I think a lot of us in the Star Wars community had either met or knew Robert. What were your experiences meeting him at shows?
Met him a couple of times, and just always very nice and very chatty and that. The last time I met him was with you, in fact, when we were at the Smuggler's Star Wars Day in Croydon. But luckily, Robert went on and did a couple more shows. You know, a few more people got to meet him. He did like location work on You Only Live Twice, and he was, I think, the second unit director on Thunderball as well. So he's crossed multiple franchises for both you and I. He was always forthcoming with chatter about all that stuff. So yeah, it's a bit sad, but you must have spoke to him a few times. Did you interview him?
I interviewed him in 2008 for my old site Lightsaber, which was really interesting because one, it was just a joy to get to speak to him back then. And second, once we got talking before the actual sort of interview properly started, he recognised the accent. So where are you from? Yeah, what in the Midlands? Yeah, Lichfield. So, all right, is that near Warsaw? Yeah. I did my national service at Whittington Barracks. Whittington Barracks is like 5 minutes up the road from where I lived. So we talked about that for a little while and then piled into the interview. It was just around the time that Crystal Skull was coming out. He was quite miffed because he hadn't been invited to the premiere. So he was a little bit sour about that. And thankfully, I just mentioned FanX this weekend. Julian Owen from Alliance Agents was there. He was Robert's agent. He helped organise, along with John Rhys-Davies, to get Robert to the Dial of Destiny premiere, where, of course, most people will have now seen that wonderful picture of him meeting Harrison. He really wanted to meet Harrison again.
Hello, I'm Dennis Lawson, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Very recently, we had Steve Sansweet on the show talking about the upcoming Rancho Obi-Wan benefit in Seattle. That event took place at the Museum of Pop Culture, and during that event, Mark Daniel, the host and the voice of Fantha Tracks Radio, Gus Lopez, Duncan Jenkins, Lisa Stevens, Steve, Vic Wirtz, and Rich Smolin from Rancho Obi-Wan all got up on stage to reveal that their collections are coming together to form something that would be known as the Saga Museum. Now, that incorporates Rancho Obi-Wan, Boba Cabana, Smithsonian, and the Imperial Archives. Amazing collections, all of them, scattered around the country, coming together in one place. They don't know where it's going to be, but they kind of know what they want it to be. It's going to take numerous years to do. It's a massive, massive endeavour. I was blown away when I heard about this. What did you make of this, Mark, when you heard about these incredible collections all coming together?
I suppose it's a question, isn't it? Some of these guys, Gus Lopez, Duncan Jenkins, and Steve Sansweet, obviously, their names transcend beyond, obviously, just the hardcore Star Wars collector into people, more casual fans who kind of know that these guys have got absolutely incredibly vast and impressive collections.
Yeah.
So to bring them all together, I guess what this is really doing, it's a legacy thing, really, isn't it? Nobody ever really plonks down some serious cash and says, do you know what? We're going to actually do a museum, do something actually that's going to really hopefully cement the actual legacy of a whole saga. And I think this will. And I think the fact that it's done by the fans is going to be fantastic. I can remember speaking to Steve probably back in 2016 at Celebration London. Yeah. And he was saying, the most important things in his collection these days are the fan-made items. He says give him the most enjoyment, when he receives them, some of them are gifts and or when he purchases them. They're always different approaches, somebody's different vision of what the franchise is. And so being able to see all this and share this with the public, I think is going to be brilliant, because the films, and I think we both like to agree that hopefully Star Wars will outlive you and I. So therefore it's going to outlive Steve and Gus and everybody else, and they have got these amazing collections. So what do you do with it once your time's come? Or maybe you get to a point whereby you just can't house it all in, the various places that they're kept. You wouldn't be able to combine them, and hopefully people can enjoy it for years to come. It'll be a tourist must-see place.
Oh, totally. I mean, I think it's a question for any collector, a regular collector like yourself, but and myself, and people like us who've got sizable collections, but they're sizable fan collections. What these guys have got are just another level. Between the four of them, they've got 1.5 million objects, and what they're planning on doing is bringing it together in a public museum, and there's going to be programming and exhibits and amenities. I mean, just going from the Saga Museum website, which is currently part of the Rancho Obi-Wan site, they're looking for a 200,000 square foot space. They'll have a general store, so they'll merch it like they do with Rancho, so there'll be a merch area, event facilities, a restaurant, a research centre, rotating exhibits, a 300-seat theatre. There'll be permanent exhibits and educational academy, so they're very much into the educational stuff, as Steve mentioned recently on Making Tracks. Indoor community spaces, meetings and conference rooms, outdoor and rooftop gathering spaces. They're spending a couple of years trying to raise basically $2 million to make this happen, and they don't really know where it's going to be yet. So it kind of feels like, in the same way the Lucas Museum was sort of having cities bid for it. First it was San Francisco, then it was going to be Chicago, and it ended up in LA. Yeah. Where will this Saga Museum be? Because Steve is just north of San Francisco in Petaluma, and Gus is in Seattle. Vic and Lisa are in Seattle. Duncan's in the Kansas area. Geographically different places. Where do you stick it? Do you stick it on the East Coast, the West Coast? Do you stick it somewhere in the middle?
That's always going to be the problem, though, isn't it? Where would you put it? It's got to be accessible, right? So do you put it somewhere close to like a high fan transit area? People say always go to say San Francisco or something like that. Do you put it there or that? But then also you're going to need to get the space. So it's not only for the cost of the actual building. You've got to buy the land, or at least lease the land for so many years and stuff to make it even viable. And then in this day and age, you think about putting it in California and you're like, well, what about the wildfires, flooding? And so there's a number of like really environmental factors that you need to consider.
Yeah, that's a great point, because Steve mentioned that. He said their insurance, because exactly what you just said, because of the wildfires, their insurance has gone up sevenfold. Scary numbers. And I mean, their focus is going to be national. You know, they're going to want to attract folks from the States. But also, if you want to put it near an international airport or a hub, there's hubs around the country that are logical, logistical places that you would want to do it. You know, if you're flying in from the UK, for example, not that that's their prime concern, but just thinking if you're flying in from the UK, one flight may be a connection. But even internally within the States, you know, there's only so far of a radius that people will drive. Most people have got to fly in. So, yeah, there's a lot of considerations.
So does this mean that Rancho is going to be wound down, as it were?
I think things will run as normal at Rancho for at least a couple of years, because this project is going to take at least a couple of years. Not that Smithsonian, Bobby Cabana, Imperial Archive are open to the public in the way that Rancho is. That's the one that's sort of slightly different.
I was going to say, because they're all more private collections, aren't they?
Yeah, because Rancho's a 501c, so it's a non-profit organisation, so it's a different setup. But it'd be interesting to see how that plays. I know we're going to speak to Steve soon, and we'll both be able to put our questions to him in that sense. And I guess he and the other guys only know so much, because I think now I know they've been working on this for about 3 years. And so now the real work starts, because it's out there and announced now. The Saga Museum is a thing. So it's going to be fascinating to follow. I know we're going to follow it closely on Fantha Tracks, and definitely you and myself on Making Tracks.
Hello, this is Jay Manchand. I'm a Star Wars Tops artist, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Back in the summer, I had the good fortune to attend Starfury Invasion in Birmingham. There was a number of Star Wars guests. It was a fantastic weekend. And I did have the chance to go backstage and talk to Richard Dillaine. Richard was Davo Sculdun in Andor, a key sequence near the end of season 1. So this is myself and Richard just before he went out for his very first convention ever, talking on Making Tracks.
So we're here at Starfury Invasion. We're here with Richard. How is life treating you, and how's the show going so far?
Which show?
This one. You've not been on stage yet, have you?
Oh, this convention? No, I haven't. I've just had some photographs taken.
Yeah.
And all new to me.
Oh, right. So convention's not a thing that you've done so far before. Is this your first one?
This is my first one.
Oh, wow. So we've caught you at the right time then. Yeah. So what are your expectations and hopes for today?
To be honest, my only image of conventions was formed when I saw Galaxy Quest. So. Oh.
That's a pretty high benchmark.
It is.
I don't think any spaceships are going to come crashing in at the end of this one.
That's news to me.
So, given that's all that you know of conventions and such, and this is such a nice, easy-going late. You couldn't have picked a better one to start with, really.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't make the first 2 days. So.
You picked the right day.
Today.
It's nice and chilled out. Yeah. The crowds are great. You'll get some interesting questions. Step into your character in Andor season 1.
Yeah.
Davo, now he's a bit of a character. He comes in at a key moment of the storyline with a proposition that's quite shocking to specifically to Mon Mothma, the whole scenario that as we've been watching as fans. Yeah. What was your impression of the character? Or what did you know of the character before you sort of stepped on set? What was your vibe for him?
Nothing. The script that they'd sent me was a sort of an adapted version of the scene to disguise the fact that it was Star Wars.
Sure.
So I didn't really understand what was going on in the scene.
Yeah.
I'd turn up on set. Unfortunately, I worked with Genevieve before and also with Ben before. And Genevieve took me aside and gave me a bit of background.
Yeah.
Well, that was my level of knowledge.
Were you aware? Obviously, you're aware of Star Wars. Everyone's aware of Star Wars. But did you have much knowledge? Had you seen the films in the past?
No, I'd never seen the Star Wars, any of the Star Wars things, apart from sitting with my kids once upon a few times.
Yeah. So, again, coming into this scenario, what were you expecting? Because the immediate view of Star Wars is exploding Death Stars and laser fights and all that stuff. Andor's much more grown up and grounded.
I kind of knew because I'd spoken to Tony Gilroy on the phone, and he'd given me the rundown on that it was a different take, it was a different angle.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be any exploding stars or anything.
Yeah.
Was aware it was of a different sort of colour to most of the Star Wars franchise.
Very. And your character, when he comes in, is clearly a man of means. He knows stuff. You feel that he's got a box full of secrets that he could pop out at any moment.
Yeah.
Where do you go to pull that kind of character out? Because he stands out very definitively in the whole scope of that first season.
It's what's on the page. It's the old actor's answer. It's what's on the page. If it's there, I didn't go studying any plutocrats.
Well, no, I was going to say it's tough. There's not a lot you can study in Star Wars for that kind of character. So
no. Elon Musk is probably a good model.
Yeah. Yeah.
It didn't occur to me at the time.
And now, having got that on your resume, and you come into this world now, I'm waving around the green room, and you're about to go on stage at some point today.
Yeah.
Does it interest you? Have you been so busy you've not had the chance to do it yet? Did it take a bit of time to kind of go, yeah, let's give this a go?
I haven't thought about it really at all. I didn't know anyone who did them, really. It just came up in conversation and someone gave me a name, so it went from there.
Brilliant. Well, hope everything goes well later on.
Thank you.
I'm sure it will. I'm looking forward to watching it. And we'll catch up again soon.
Sure.
I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, and you are following Fantha Tracks.
Cast your mind back. Where were you? You know, we're now 10 years, and it's been the 10-year anniversary of Star Wars Rebels, which has kind of gone by slightly unnoted, really. I think it's time that we have a bit of a celebration. So, Mr. Newbold, 10 years of Star Wars Rebels.
It still feels fresh. I think, like you just said, Lucasfilm gets sold in 2012, and we know that The Force Awakens or Episode 7 is coming in 2015, and all of that's announced. And then somewhere in the mix, they very wisely, because of the way things were, they had to sort of put a pin in the Clone Wars. So Lucasfilm decided to stop the Clone Wars because that was that, and this is the new era. And they come up with Rebels, which is in that beautiful sweet spot leading up to A New Hope. So all of that was great. And it gives you familiar vehicles and familiar characters and a familiar scenario that we wouldn't have that familiar scenario by the time we get to The Force Awakens, because it's this whole new era. So it's a very smart comfort blanket thing to launch with. But I don't think Lucasfilm could have expected it to have cottoned on and caught on with the fans in quite the way that it did. But when that show came out and launched this new era, and it's running along the same time period as Andor, that sort of 5 years between A New Hope, and we've got Rogue One coming down the road, so that ties in together nicely, and Solo not that long after, that ties in together nicely. So all of those elements just melted together. And not only that, it gave us all these really cool characters.
That's it, isn't it? I mean, you think actually now we're kind of seeing the fruits of Star Wars Rebels' labours, because we're seeing these characters move into live action with Ahsoka, Hera, and Sabine, and a brief shot of Zeb in Mandalorian. It was one of those weird things when it started. I think everybody was like, oh, it's on Disney XD, so it's going to be, it's definitely going to be for kids. But in classic Lucas animation fashion, it very rapidly became apparent that actually it really wasn't. And you think about some of those episodes we had, we had the final confrontation between Obi-Wan and Darth Maul, in one, I think one of the best episodes that they ever put out. And, then you had the whole Agent Callus and, Fulcrum and who's Fulcrum and that. And there was a lot that they kind of put into that show. And, for people who still discount it because it's a kids show, I think they're really doing the series a disservice and also themselves a disservice for not actually watching it.
Paul Naylor on Good Morning Tatooine this week said a really interesting thing, that you think that we had those 4 seasons of Rebels and it finished, and it took us beyond the end of Return of the Jedi, and it leaves us with Hera and Sabine, and that setup that was left kind of hanging. You could argue Ahsoka is essentially season 5 of Rebels because of the Thrawn aspects, because of the continuation of the characters. And like you said now, so many of these characters are live action characters interacting with Mon Mothma or C-3PO, or we're seeing them on places like Corellia. And I'm waggling the air quotes, that's not good on a podcast, but they're real now. Not that anything we've seen in Clone Wars, Rebels, Bad Batch or anything else isn't real Star Wars. Of course it's real Star Wars. But it just gives it that extra little validity, if you want to say, when it becomes a live action thing.
Absolutely. You think about how fondly regarded like Vanessa Marshall still is, and Tia Sarkar and all the Rebels cast. They still make many fan convention appearances up and down, the US and over here in the UK and that. What I always liked about Rebels was the fact that they were very clever in channeling the Ralph McQuarrie concept art as a design concept for the overall kind of language of that series. And I think that really helped bed it into the era that it needed to be. You had those slightly not quite right looking stormtroopers because they were kind of like the concept stormtroopers and that. And I think that all worked.
The stubbier wing TIE fighters. And
But exactly, and even just down to like, you know, all those just general background characters in like low format, they just were literally just taken off of you know, some of the Mos Eisley concept art, which for us, obviously as older fans who have looked at those paintings for many years, it just brings it all together. And I think that was an absolutely genius stroke that they did that.
It was a genius stroke. Coming up, we'd got Doug Chang, who'd done phenomenal work on the prequels, was about to do great work on the sequels, and so Macquarie DNA is in all of Star Wars, but it wasn't quite so obvious. But like you say, you go to Rebels, and it's right there in your face. Okay, Force Awakens, there's definitely a bit the archway entrance to the village that you saw in Force Awakens. There are definitely elements in there, and the silhouettes are clear, classic elements. But you could point to Cantwell for Star Destroyer, TIE Fighter, X-Wing, as much as you could point to Macquarie. So Rebels, like you say, is completely littered with that kind of vibe. The Clone Wars came back. And by the time the Clone Wars came back, it had so much more weight and heft to it because of what happened in Rebels, because we'd stepped ahead and we saw Ahsoka come back and then the clashes that she has with Anakin / Vaderkin. And so when you come back to season 7, it just has that different feel. We'd already seen, as you mentioned, Obi-Wan and Maul having their final meeting. We've seen that. By the time we see Solo in 2018, and then we see Clone Wars in 2019. So all these things it's classic Star Wars, isn't it? We're hopping backwards and forwards to the timeline. But because we kind of know what's coming, it just gives that extra weight. So I think one big tick in the box for Rebels is that it really added some heft to stuff that no doubt Clone Wars would have been amazing. Everybody wanted Clone Wars to come back. They absolutely smashed it. It was as good as when Clone Wars was really ticking over like great guns, sort of seasons 3 and 4. Season 7 was easily as good as that. They did such a great job.
And as you said, we probably wouldn't have had that if it wasn't for the popularity of Star Wars Rebels. And I reckon, obviously, we wouldn't have had Ahsoka for series, or at least in the incarnation that we've got it. Whether or not you enjoyed it, loved it, hated it, thought it was all right, there's some serious world building going on, which has been built off of the shoulders of the Star Wars Rebels. So 2012 onwards, that 10 years is as fertile and as golden an era of Star Wars as there's ever been.
Oh, no doubt. The amount of stuff that came out, the amount of eras that got touched on, you think from, 98 right through to sort of 2012 when Clone Wars finished, that was pretty much all focus on prequel era,
prequels, wasn't it? Pretty much. Yeah, that was, all the products pretty much were that. And there wasn't really any other content, which is great because actually, again, we're seeing that now when we go to the cinemas. The Clone Wars and the prequel era has a fan base, a dedicated hardcore fan base of its own. I don't think you can deny that, really.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds. Bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
So this past weekend, I was lucky enough to attend FanX in Farnborough. It was a wonderful event. We'll talk more about it over forthcoming episodes because I got loads of content. But the first one coming from that show was with Cecily Fay. Cecily was a caretaker in The Last Jedi. She also played the Meat in Doctor Who. So here's myself and Cecily sitting down at FanX in Farnborough.
So we're here at FanX in Farnborough. It's Sunday afternoon. So how is Cecily? How are you?
Hi, I'm great, thank you. Yeah.
How are you enjoying the show? It's your first show, isn't it?
It is my first show, yes. It's been really interesting for me to see, and there's been just such lovely people that are just so passionate about these productions and these stories that it's been lovely.
And what were your expectations coming in? Because you work with a lot of people that do these shows.
Yeah, do you know what? I had no expectation whatsoever because even though, I've worked with quite a few people that do these things, it's like when you're on set, you don't really get into it. But they did persuade me to come because they did say it would be fun.
And you're glad you did it?
I am very glad, yeah. I've met some lovely people.
So you've got this amazing array of characters. I mean, the one that people will think of immediately is the Meat, of course, from Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So how enjoyable has it been to be able to sit down and sort of give people an insight into your work on these and the things that you did? It must have been fun.
Do you know what? It's been amazing to talk about it and tell the stories, because normally those stories, they don't go anywhere. No one hears all the funny things that happen behind the scenes and the kind of the effort and the intricacy that goes into some of these really complicated characters, where inside the character you can't see, you can't hear, and you can't breathe pretty much. So all the funny things that do happen, especially in the Meat, where I had no vision at all. I did crash into the set a couple of times when trying to exit shot. Yeah.
You did a Doctor Who panel yesterday.
Yes.
You were on with a couple of, including Brian Herring, of course, for people know for BB-8, and explaining how you had to crouch down.
That's right, yeah. It's pretty much like a stress position I had to be in, like crouched down but raised up on my toes.
Yeah.
So yeah, good job I've got strong quads.
Well, what's your history? Because you mentioned martial arts.
I'm a martial artist, so really I would say I'm a movement artist,
right.
because I started as a ballet dancer, but very quickly got into martial arts, and I'm a sword specialist.
Right.
So between all those things, I've done theatre, I've done quite a lot of stunt work because I do a lot of action. I've also done some low budget martial arts films.
Right.
And things like that. So between that and the creature performance, there's lots of weird and wonderful things on my CV.
And what was your entry into this world? Again, I'm looking at the table with all the characters, Dark Crystal and obviously the Caretaker from Last Jedi, all these characters. What was the sort of entry
point? The very first creature characters that I did was in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Right.
Yeah. So I play... I don't know what it was called, but there was two of us acrobats, and we were like a fluffy pillow on the Vilt Bottle planet, and we had to basically look like we were the wrong way up, because we'd be standing on one hand and one foot and then suddenly be the right way up. And we had like a whole routine of like tumbling over each other in these big fluffy pillow outfits. And then it was all rehearsed and all that kind of thing. And then they wet the set down before the shoot,
Right.
And so literally our first thing, we ended up rolling through a giant puddle. And so suddenly these costumes that were relatively light was like dragging an iron weight around with you because they were soaked full of water. So that was my first experience of being inside a
and you wanted
costume.
to carry on?
Yeah, I was also inside the original Marvin robot costume in one like kind of heritage sort of shot,
Oh, the original Marvin.
The original Marvin. They have it in the film. There's one shot, and I'm inside it.
But I say I'm a Hitchhiker's fan, so I remember that from back in the day. So.
So there's cool. So that was great.
Oh, high five for that! I did not know that. That is very cool. Moving forward, obviously, Caretaker.
Yes,
Jedi. So how did that come along?
Well, that came along. That was quite a few years later, and. By that time I have been sort of like known for creature performance. I've done some very big kids TV things, including Zingzillas. So again, there's sort of like a group of us that get known for being able to pretty much be quite hardcore in these things, because it is difficult. And there was like a group audition for it, and they pretty much all the people in it were people I've worked with before.
Which must be helpful.
Yeah, it is, because there's definitely a good camaraderie among everyone.
And you say about stress positions for the meet. What were the requirements for being in that Caretaker costume?
Do you know what? It wasn't as bad as some things. Again, it's always the heads that are very heavy and restricted sight. But for this, because we rehearsed, again, like there was a big dance sequence, which we're all in. So, and obviously it didn't make it into the actual film, but I think that deleted scene has been released, hasn't it? So there was a lot of rehearsal for the dance routine. So it's one of those funny moments, again, where you rehearse it in normal clothes, then you put the costume on, and the whole thing's carnage.
Different thing altogether.
That's it. So I was in the dance scene, and I was also the drummer. So in that sequence, there's one that's playing the drums, and I'm playing that as well.
Are you a drummer?
Yeah, I can play the drums. Weirdly, I've played a few characters that I did drum a little when I was a kid.
Oh, there you go.
But I play drum in Zingzillas. Yeah.
Transferable skills.
Yeah.
Being in Star Wars, I mean, it's a big deal.
Yes.
It's always a big deal.
Yes.
And you've been involved in numerous fandoms,
yes.
just looking at these here. So what would you say the difference is between, let's say, being in Doctor Who or being involved in Dark Crystal and then being involved in Star Wars?
I think often it's to do with so for instance in Star Wars there's a lot of us in costume and we're almost like part of the background action as those type of characters, whereas obviously being the meat is a main character and you're it's a main character interacting with the lead actors and so it's a very different experience on that level. It's the same with the Dark Crystal, because obviously Olga is a main character. It's just a different experience depending on if the character is really interacting with the other actors or what your level of character is, I suppose.
So after doing the meet, it's got so much attention. I mean, they're
Yes.
holding the comic because the character's based on an early 80s
yeah.
comic, as Brian mentioned in the panel. How do I word it? Do you feel not spoiled? That's not the right way, but I mean that character was so much of a focus.
Yeah.
Early in the season.
It was just lovely to be in it because like it being a main character and really essentially being treated as a lead actor was a different experience than sometimes. You know, I mean, in some things you are definitely more of the background, but obviously the Meep is a main character.
Totally.
So that was a great experience for me.
And what's next for you?
Well, at the moment I'm teaching a lot of seminars in sword fighting and things like that. And I also sing with a band, and we've got some records coming out.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Yeah, we did trance music back in the heyday of trance, which has now become like quite iconic records, and there's a whole new young crowd that are into it, and there's some sort of young remixers and things that have got back in contact with me, and so there's some hardcore trance records coming out by the Morrigan. That's my band. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So many things, many plates spinning.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, which is the best way to be.
That's what it totally is. Thanks so much for your time.
No problem at all. It was lovely to chat to you.
Hello, this is Mark Thompson. I narrate a bunch of the Star Wars audiobooks, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks. Do or do not. There is no try.
So, final thing for this episode, we've got a listener's question. It's come from our old buddy Skyhawker, and I shall read it out right now. Hi, Marks. Today, I went to my local cinema to watch A New Hope, as I hadn't seen it on the big screen in many years. I've watched this film over 100 times, so before watching it today, I was worried that I might get bored watching it yet again. Happily, I was completely wrong, and the film kept me entertained throughout. I had a smile on my face almost all of the time, and even got close to choking up on the binary sunset and the death of Owen and Beru. I think this was down to 47 years of built-up nostalgia in me, taking me back to being a kid and playing with the old Palitoy action figures. That John Williams score was a magical way of unlocking distant memories that have been locked away since childhood. My only quibble was the 1997 special edition scenes still stick out like a sore thumb, and I can only hope that Disney released the original versions on the 50th anniversary. I walked out of the cinema feeling thoroughly happy and content. Have either of you seen the original trilogy in the cinema lately? And if so, how did it affect you? Cheers, guys. Skyhawker. So, great question. Mark, have you seen any of the original, well, let's stick to the original, any of the original trilogy Star Wars films recently? Maybe not just on this run, but in the last few years.
Every time they get released, I make a point of seeing them, just because I'm like a broken record at this point. They deserve to be seen on the big screen. It's not so much you notice, but you just absorb it differently when you're sat in a cinema and you can't just pause it to go for a pee. And you can't just look at your phone, or if you do, you get a punch from me. And to be fair, the UK cinemas are showing them in order, oddly without Solo in there, which is a weird thing. Yeah. I wonder if it's just a scheduling thing. Anyhow, it's always nice to see the original trilogy. I mean, and for me, we saw Phantom Menace not so long ago, May, because that was the 25th anniversary. That was really fun. And then we saw Attack of the Clones. So, like, Attack of the Clones tends to be my least favorite. If you have to give me a ranking, that tends to be my least favorite Star Wars film. But I'm just like, oh, this is actually a lot better. Oh, actually, I kind of feel like I can get this a bit more now. I mean, I don't get that with the original trilogy because I have seen it for many, many years. Because I studied those films also in university, I kind of feel like, yes, I'm sure there's still lessons to teach me, but I haven't had some kind of profound kind of like, oh, actually, that's better than I remember. And the thing is, I saw Attack of the Clones in like March, but I definitely put it on before Easter, if not like just after I watched Phantom Menace. But then to see it on the big screen again, which is the first time I've seen it since 2002. No, I saw Attack of the Clones with 3D at Celebration in 2016. Okay, I'm definitely appreciate this more now. I know we're going to stick to original trilogy, but hey, this is making tracks and we make the rules on this one. So
I agree. I saw Phantom earlier in the year, which was amazing to see again. I haven't seen Clones on the big screen for a long time, and I really want to. And I was away. Obviously, they've been re-showing them and such at the cinema. So I think our local is sort of rotating them all. I think so. I might get lucky and get the chance to see Clones. And last year, Jedi 40th, so a whole bunch of us went to see Jedi last year, which was amazing. You know, again, it's another film I've seen on the big screen many times, and it was so cool that you don't have to focus on the middle of the screen.
No,
you can kind of look to the left or look to the right and say, "Oh, wow, I never noticed that little dude walking around," or because you get so wrapped up in it.
That's always a scary thing, like especially when before George sold it to Disney. Every time there was a re-release, you're like, was that dude always in there? Especially in Jabba's palace, you're like, I could have sworn they've added him. And then you kind of go back and like, okay, maybe it's just because I'm used to watching it on a PAL 576 kind of like lines of like nothing. The biggest gripe that I've had with Star Wars, especially like special edition scenes, and that I agree with Gareth Hagan when he says that really actually there isn't anything new that you learn about Jabba the Hutt scene in Docking Bay 94. It's a nice thing to have, and I think that's kind of like where you kind of go, that's a special edition version. But it kind of slows the pace down a little bit. But it's the darn rocks they've comped on in front of R2. It's like the most literal tweak you could have made. And it's really badly executed. I don't understand what the need was to change that.
It's the same as when you see the Mos Eisley sequences. I know we're going off a tangent again, but, the Mos Eisley scenes. And when you saw it originally, adding the Ronto with the Jawa swinging off it, I said, okay, I can take that. The entrance,
it's fun. The
entrance into Mos Eisley I like because it gives you a better sense of the geography of the town. So that was good. Even though the two stormtroopers stood side by side and literally completely flipped. But it was 1996 when they did the visuals. So, I get it, early days. So I can forgive that. And a few other little bits. But the bit I hate, but there's a scene just before Ben does the mind trick, and you have about 4 seconds of a Ronto's arse walking past the screen, covering up all that stuff that you could see. And it's like, why are we not? There's stuff down the street. There's the main characters. That's the one that bugs me more than any. Everything else I can kind of get over.
I understand using from a marketing term, using the term special edition rather than say director's cut.
Sure.
I mean, and the McClunky edit, actually, even when I watched it in August, I was like, again, why? I mean, the thing is a timing thing. They keep on tweaking the whole hand shot first kind of thing. So they almost shot at the same time. But of course, you need something to kind of fill out that slight difference in time and stuff. But I kind of almost feel really with A New Hope, not so much with the other two, but with A New Hope, that kind of almost feel like they should say, let's re-release it for the 50th. And this 1997 edition is the director's cut, shall we say, or the Lucas edition or something. And then you've got like the original edition. It's so difficult because now you think about it, how many people have actually been introduced to Star Wars, the original trilogy, who have only known a CG
special edition
and a 4-second Ronto arse.
They've never seen seen anything different.
I mean, the other day I've brought a SCART to HDMI convertedly so I can plug my VHS in, so I can just go back and watch an officially licensed pre-special edition version, not like a despecialized edition, which is great, but even that is kind of like subjective because it's somebody else who's making decisions based on what they think should be the ultimate version. So therefore you kind of go, well, that's their choice to an extent. But it's like, well, actually, I mean, I grew up, I watched, the white CBS Fox VHSs like from John Menzies. That was where I watched it first in like 91, 92, something like that.
Yeah.
So you kind of go, that's what I kind of almost want to see again for nostalgia. It's going to look rubbish because it's going to be 4x3 blown up onto a 4K TV. But that's kind of the fun of it.
But don't you think, though, if you showed the originals and let's say you found a video copy of October 82 when it first hits television with the adverts and everything. I still watch Star Wars now and I know where the adverts would have gone. When I watched it on Central Television back in 82, I know where the adverts sit.
See, there's a version of ITV of 1992 New Year's Eve, like Empire Strikes Back, same thing, and Return of Jedi. After like Han goes into a cell with Chewie and Chewie's grabbing him, stroking his hair, that's where they cut to the commercial. Some of these things are just
coded in. In Star Wars, it was just the detention block breaking. Get behind me, get behind me. There was the advert, just Luke, R2 and 3PO going into Luke's hangar. After that sequence, that was an advert. So there's always these little things that you remember. But I'm just thinking, you sit down with a kid now, a modern Star Wars fan. Let's say a kid, that's patronising, but a modern Star Wars fan.
Yes.
And go, right, this is the version of, and we never called it A New Hope, we called it Star Wars. This is the version of A New Hope that we would have sat and watched. And I probably watched this version, I'd comfortably say 100 times, because I had control of the television during the 6 weeks holiday, and that thing was on all the time. It was that and Raiders and Superman 3. That was all that got, and Battle Beyond the Stars weirdly got played a lot. But, those things was all that was on. And watch this. And I imagine a kid would be like, really? You watched this?
Well,
that was your... it'd be like comparing, I don't know, Star Wars Outlaws to playing Empire Strikes Back on the Atari. It's like,
Dark
really?
Forces. I mean, I was just going to say, and this is almost to our point or to my point, the CG Battle of Yavin absolutely looks fantastic. I can't really remember a time now what to really remind me of what that original Battle of Yavin looks like.
Same.
Which is a reason why I got that converted, so I could just sit down one day, just plug it in and just go, let's just see how it is. Hope the VHS doesn't chew up the tape. It's all nostalgia, isn't it, at this point? We're talking about a film that was made over 40 years ago.
Even 1997 is nostalgia. Think about it.
Yeah. So that's worrying. So there will come a point where actually I'm sure there will be some people who will still be like, release for 4K original edition. But then will come a point where most of those fans won't be around anymore. And so there will only be that. And it will still be on the Heroes channel on Disney Plus.
That was my next thing. That was literally my next point. It's like, if you're ever going to release the original, and I'm waggling the air quotes because that's such a spurious phrase as well, because there was the TV edit.
Or we do a 70mm.
Exactly. There was the airplane edits with different sound mixes. You know, how many versions of Empire was there? Pre-premiere, post-premiere?
There was stereo mix and mono mix. For Star Wars.
Yeah.
I mean, different probably versions of that. And, you know, every single iteration from that. There's been tweaks all the way along. So
how many times did they redub Aunt Beru? Because the version of Aunt Beru I remember is not the version that you hear in the special edition. It's a different vocal. There's things that 3PO says that you hear now that you never heard in the mix that was on television, certain lines. So there's lots of little things that got tweaked and adjusted.
Exactly. I know, like some films like Blade Runner and some of the Aliens and stuff like that, they've all had different versions of stuff, but I don't think any film has been anywhere near as tweaked. And really, up until obviously the internet, really, like, you know, most of it we would have been kind of oblivious unless you went back and you did compare like your VHS to like a DVD copy or something like that.
Yeah.
Laserdisc. Yeah. So from what I understand, there's an original print in the American archive, which you could only get access if you're a journalist. Maybe we could write an article for the Fantha Tracks, go over there and watch it just to see. Talking to Steve Sansweet about it, you know, it's like there's people who are convinced they saw the scene with Biggs.
Yeah.
Never did.
It's the Mandela effect, isn't it? It never happened.
The thing is that like, if you get the chance, just go and see it. I think it's fair to say we're only having this gift, and it is a bit of a gift, because we've had the writer strike, so there's not so many films out. But at the same time, we should go and see it. So
your point in answer to Skyhawker's question, yes, go and see him as much as you can. You don't get to see him on the big screen that often. There's lots of Star Wars anniversaries, but there's only so many times you can keep putting them out. For the next few years, you might not get the opportunity, so it's definitely worth doing.
And always get sweet popcorn, never salty. Right, well, I think that's all we have got time for this week's episode. So thank you very much, Mr. Skyhawker, for another question. We should probably get him a patch or something produced for most questions asked. So if you want to steal the patch off Mr. Skyhawker, you've got to send him quite a few questions, but you might as well start with at least one. So Mark, can you let everybody know how they can get in touch with a listener's question?
I definitely can, and this is how you do it.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
And that's me done for this episode.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, mate. Lovely to see you, as always. Let's do it again this time next week. So, until then, everybody, stay safe, take care, have a fantastic Star Wars week, whatever that means for you. And as always, may the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Collecting Tracks.